Mike, check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector. And one of the questions I often get is now a good time to start collecting video games or retro games? And my immediate answer to that is going to be if you're interested in building a video game collection, start with the Switch. I would not go retro. I would not pursue retro games right at this time. While retro games are starting to go down in price for some games, a lot of the retro games that a lot of people want are still priced pretty high. And I think for most new collectors, you're probably going to get your best bang for buck by going after Switch games. The Switch is easy, it's abundant. There are a ton of places you can buy Switch games, mom and pop shops, big box retailers. You don't have to worry about you know resellers for the most part, because there's so many copies to go around that it doesn't benefit resellers to try and snipe certain Switch games. So and then even if you are interested in picking up, let's say, limited edition Switch games, you can buy most of the new limited edition Switch games at regular market price, right? Before they explode in value. So all you got to do is go to the websites like Limited Run, Strictly Limited. And if you're into that, then you can get into that aspect of collecting for the Switch and do it without breaking the bank. So that would be my immediate answer to that. But if you were hell bent on picking up retro games, then there are a few categories that I would tell you to start with. First of all, I would tell you to start looking at Gen 6 and Gen 7 games. Just because those games are the most abundant out of all retro games. You're going to see those most out in the wild. And there's those libraries for both Gen 6 and both Gen 7. There are still a lot of games for the consoles that came out in that generation that are still priced fairly. Don't get me wrong, you have a lot of games, a lot of Gen 6 and Gen 7 games that are priced pretty high, but it's not as bad as what you would see with like Gen 5, PlayStation, N64, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, where, unless the game is, complete garbage or is a sports game, you can almost guarantee that it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So for me, I look at certain handhelds like the Vita, the PSP, and the DS. You can throw the 3DS in there, but I'm not a big fan of the 3DS library. I much prefer the DS library. I think it has a lot more variety and it's just more my style. But I would say go to Gen 6, go to Gen 7, and start with the handhelds. In particular, the PSP, the Vita, and the DS. Now, with the Vita, you have a lot of games that are still priced pretty cheap. I'm showing you Final Fantasy X and X-2, and you might be like, well, Y2K, that game is just a cheap game all around. Even if you get it on the PS2, it's still a cheap game. And that is true, but there are multiple Vita games that have come down in price. A lot of them have come down in price. A lot of the more expensive titles, even some of your limited edition titles, have come down in price. When you look at some games like Visara Collection on the PlayStation Vita, which is a strictly limited shoot 'em up, or even look at a game like Odin Sphere. These are two games that were easily $100 games, but these games have dropped significantly. And if you're a person who's looking to add, more hard-hitting titles to your Vita collection, now might be a good time to start looking into these games because they have taken a drop in price. So if retro is what you're going after and you're looking after some of that, that hardcore like rare stuff, Vita is a good platform for you to look at because a lot of the hardcore stuff on the Vita platform has dropped in price. Same thing when you look at the PlayStation Portable. In fact, when you look at PSP games, the PSP games have taken the biggest hit since the highs of 2020, and they never recovered. When you look at games like Guruman, A Monstrous Tale, and Chili Con Carnage, these are two games that I think are still locked to the PSP. I don't think we've seen a port of these games on any other platform. And these are two very, very good games. Guruman, A Monstrous Adventure, it is exactly that. It's a great adventure game. Starring this young lady whose parents are archaeologists. She uses this drill bit tool to, dig up items and, battle monsters that have taken over this city. A very cool 3D action adventure game with some platforming to it. And then you have a game like Chili Con Carnage, which is basically like if Max Payne and, Grand Theft Auto 3 came together and threw a little Mexican spin on it. That's what you're going to get here. A very fun, shoot 'em up, blow 'em up type of game where you can take cars, take weapons. It has bullet time features to it. Very cool game. But both of these games at one point were $60, $70 games, and they dropped all the way down into the $20 to $30 range. So these games have come down a lot in price, and these are very high quality games, in my opinion, for the PlayStation Portable platform. There's a lot of shovelware on the PSP, a lot of trash. But these are two good games that you will want to look out for. And if you're someone who's thinking, man, I want to get some really good games at good prices, I think where these games are priced at now is better than they've been in a really long time. Of course, you're going to have some games that are still going to be expensive, like Kenka Bancho on the PSP, which is more of like a 3D beat 'em up. Think Yakuza with this one, like Yakuza meets Tekken with like an RPG aspect to it. This is a very cool game. It was priced really high. It was a game that was worth over 100. I think it's come down now though into like the 90-ish dollar range. So even this one is taking a bit of a dip in pricing. And the PSP platform overall has a lot of really good titles that have come way down in price. So if you're wondering, is now the time to dive in? I would say go ahead and look at the PSP because it's definitely underrated. It's super underrated too. Like people never talk about the PSP. Well, hardly. I hardly ever see any videos on it. You know, no one's really mentioning it. The PSP is an underrated console. Definitely look into this one. You'll find a lot of gems on the PSP without having to break the bank. And then if you're looking for variety, right, without breaking the bank, I'm gonna say check the DS. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of DS games that have been ported to the Switch, and it's almost a situation now where almost any Nintendo game might get a port to the Switch. But you still have a couple that have not been ported yet. Games like A Monstrous Tale, which is a really cool take on like a Metroidvania style game. This is like a Metroidvania meets like, it has like Elisa Dragoon elements to it where you have these little monsters that help you fight throughout the level. It's kind of like, it's like a Metroidvania Mega Man meets Elisa Dragoon with like a coat of Pokemon painted on it. It's a very cool type of game, one that I have not seen on any other platform, but you definitely want to keep an eye out for it. And then you've got the games like Princess Peach, which again is a really good game. This one isn't super cheap. It's like a $40 game or so. But this is one that you could definitely enjoy. It's come down from its highs. Like a lot of these games, they've come down from their highs. And then you have the Mega Man Zero collection. Now, a lot of these Mega Man games have gotten ports to the Switch and the PlayStation 4. You've got the Zero collection on the Switch and the PlayStation 4. And I feel like they're going to port Mega Man games. They're going to put Mega Man games on every console till the end of time. People will always want to play Mega Man. But you've got these compilation games on the DS that I think you will enjoy. And these games, because some of these are getting ports to the Switch, they're getting better prices on their original consoles. Now, speaking of compilations, the PlayStation 3 and 360 are also a good place to look. If I were starting a collection and I was hell-bent on going retro, I would look for these collection discs, these collection games on the PlayStation 3. You've got the Prince of Persia collection, the Sly collection, and the God of War collection. These are all classic Gen 6 games, PlayStation 2 games that have gotten a re-release or a compilation on the PlayStation 3. And I think some of these are priced pretty fairly. Like I'm pretty sure the God of War collection is like 15 to 20 bucks. Prince of Persia is like 25 bucks. The Sly collection is probably the most expensive at around 35 bucks. But you're getting a lot of bang for your buck here when it comes to these collections. And then not only that, the PlayStation 3 has a ton of games that are $5, $10, and you could have a blast with them. You know, when you think about games like Enslaved or Avatar or Thor or, the demons, not the Demon Souls, but the Dark, they're escaping me right now, but there's a lot of cheap games on the PlayStation 3 that you can definitely check out if you're wanting to go Gen 7, which is probably going to be the next best route to go. The reason why I don't put Gen 7 games over like some of these handhelds is because we've seen a surge in Gen 7 prices, especially when it comes to the 360, but some of these prices are coming back down to earth. Good example of that would be Azura's Wrath. I'm a huge fan of this game, and at one point, this was like a $65 to $70 game, but Azura's Wrath has taken a real drop, And right now it's averaging between 30 and 35, maybe 40 if someone's pushing it. But this is like a $35 game now. And I think that's a great value for this game. It's a really good game. Worth a playthrough if you're into like 3D beat 'em up games and you like that, all that fast action, from Capcom, you'll enjoy this. But again, be on the lookout. When it comes to these Gen 7 consoles, when you're looking for more of the rare or obscure titles, they're going to be pretty expensive. Now, to be honest, Spider-Man Edge of Time has actually come down in price too. You could probably pick up a copy of Spider-Man Edge of Time for maybe 50 bucks or so, where at one point this was getting up there $80, $90 at its height, and it's come down. And then the same thing with Fist of the North Star, Ken's Rage 2. Now, Ken's Rage 2 is in a bit of a class on its own, primarily because I don't think we've gotten any other North American port of this game. There was a PlayStation 3 version to this game, but it was only released in Japan. So we don't have like an English translation of this game outside of the Xbox 360. And because of that, when the 360 store closed, this game shot all the way up to 275 bucks last summer, which is crazy. I would never recommend anyone paying that price, but it has come back down to earth. And I think this game sits right now somewhere around 125, maybe 150-ish. Before the store closure, though, this was like a $40 game. So I think there's still a lot of fluctuation when it comes to Gen 7 games, and the pricing is still settling down just because it's retro, but it's some of the most modern retro games that we have. The Switch and the PlayStation 4 have not yet dropped into the realm of retro, right? So like Gen 7 is really kind of the last bastion for retro until enough time passes to where we can start including PS4 and the Switch 1 into the retro category. I saved the Gen 6 titles for last because I think the 6th gen games are the games that are going to be the most expensive. However, when it comes to Gen 6, there are a lot of games within that generation that are very good but not super expensive. A couple games that I'll highlight here. I mean, you've got Incredible Hulk on the PlayStation 2. Now this got an Xbox release and a GameCube release as well. Very good Hulk game, probably the best Hulk game of its generation. Because I think this Hulk is better than like the Incredible Hulk that was based on the movie with Ed Norton. I think this is better than the original Hulk that was based on the first Hulk. There's like a number of Hulk games that came out. I think this is the best one though. Just the action in this game, the amount of interaction that you have with the scenery, how you can kind of smash and bash everything. I think this is one of the better executed Hulk games. And it's not expensive either. That's like a $25 to $30 game. Here you have a $20 game in Beautiful Joe 2. I've always said the best way to play Beautiful Joe is on the GameCube. That's just my personal opinion. But I mean, Beautiful Joe, not super expensive, but a game that you can add to your collection for around $20 or so. And I'm showing you games that are in like the 25, 30, 35-ish range because I feel like that's kind of like the max for people who are just diving into gaming. 25, 30, 35 is what you would spend on like a new Switch or PlayStation 4 game, unless it's like a AAA title. So, I feel like collectors who are thinking about diving in, hopefully they'll be comfortable with that price range if they're thinking about starting a collection. And then you've got a game like Maximo Army of Zin, which again, this game at one point was pretty pricey. Army of Zin was getting up there, man. I think it was like 55 or 60 bucks at one point, but it's come down. I think this is like around the 35, 40-ish range. You could probably find it for cheaper. I actually picked this copy up with three other PlayStation 2 games for like $38 last year. So it was a really good deal for me. Complete in box, in great condition. And again, Gen 6 is definitely a great place to go. Now, I'm showing you these PlayStation 2 games, but there are a lot of very expensive PlayStation 2 games. And Gen 6 is kind of in that going up. It's in that place where a lot of the games are creeping up for certain games, especially the more sought after games. So you kind of just have to do your due diligence and do your research if you're going to start doing some PS2 collecting. But there's a ton of gold in that generation that you can find without necessarily having to break the bank. GameCube, in my opinion, and I'll kind of end off with the GameCube because it is Gen 6. I was gonna show Xbox, but I feel like Xbox doesn't have enough of a fan base today, I think, to to where the prices are heavily influenced. There's maybe a handful of really expensive and well-known original Xbox games, but outside of that, people aren't usually looking for Xbox because a lot of the games that came out on the Xbox also came out on the GameCube and the PlayStation 2, and because people have games that they really enjoy on those other two consoles, they'll just buy them on either one of those consoles, the PlayStation 2 or GameCube. So but I'll show you some GameCube games that I think are fluctuating in price. The Mario Party games have always been pretty expensive, especially games like Mario Party 4, but we're starting to see where some of these Mario Party games are dipping down in price. Now, there have been a couple releases of some Mario Party games, like I think Jamboree and Jamboree All-Stars or something like that. And I think there was a Mario, somebody let me know down in the comments, but I think there was a Mario Party game that was released that had like all the other Mario Parties in it. I could be wrong, let me know. That sometimes impacts the price of these games. And so if you're interested in getting in on some of the original content, now might be a good time to start looking at some of these Mario Party games because they are going down in price. Not a lot, not a ton, but they are going down in price. But then again, with the GameCube, you've got other games like Double Dash. Double Dash at one point I thought was starting to go down. I thought Double Dash was kind of dropping into the 60s, 50s, but for whatever reason, Mario Kart Double Dash just does not go down. And at this point, it's easily a $100 game. It's like a $90 to $100 game, especially if you get the version that has the bonus disc in it. And I don't know when this is going to drop. It's going to be a while, I think, before it does, because I don't think this is going to get a port anywhere. Like, we're not going to get Double Dash released on the Switch because every Nintendo console gets its own Mario Kart and gets its own like Mario adventure game, right? So and that's I would say that's starting since the Super Nintendo. So you've got Mario Kart, Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo, Mario Kart 64 on the N64. You got Double Dash on the GameCube. You've got Mario Kart Wii on the Wii. You had Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, right, on the Wii U, and then of course you've got no, I'm sorry, you got Mario Kart 8, I think, on the Wii U, and then 8 Deluxe on the Switch. So I don't know if they're going to re-release this. I think a lot of people are looking forward to Mario Kart 9 on the Switch too, and they're hoping that a lot of the features that showed up in Double Dash will show up on that Mario Kart. But for whatever reason, this Mario Kart is just not going down in price. So this is one that you got to keep your eyes open for, but this might not be the best time to buy like GameCube games. Even when you look at a game like Luigi's Mansion, this game has ports to the 3DS. I mean, there's a Luigi's Mansion on the Switch, but the GameCube version is still just really expensive. And then forget about it. I mean, when it comes to these Sonic games on the GameCube, whether it's DX, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, or even Shadow, because of the movie, there you go. I mean, the price of all these games has shot like astronomically, like through the roof. So to me, the GameCube is probably the least favorable console to start collecting for if you're thinking about collecting for any consoles right now. I say, like I said, start with the handhelds if you're thinking about building a retro collection. The PSP is one of the best ways to go. You don't have a lot of collecting competition when it comes to collecting for the PSP. You won't have to compete with a lot of people because that console isn't a console that's on a lot of people's radar, but I think you could get a lot of bang for your buck out of that one. So let me know what you think of my assessment. Let me know if there's any consoles that I missed that are worth picking up or looking into, and I will catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.